Chuck Dick. I have the privilege of being one of the co-chairs for CalArb's programming committee, and I am serving today as a moderator in the latest in our series called California Conversations. We have a very interesting guest today, and one I know that you are going to enjoy learning about his background, profiting from his experiences, and sharing his enthusiasm for the profession. But let me first begin by just saying plain welcome to you, Marcus Quintanilla. My friend, I'm delighted to have you here as part of California Conversations. Good to see you and good to have you with us.
Thank you very much, Chuck. I do hope that our chat today will give some insights to especially newer practitioners in the area of arbitration and international arbitration. But you are actually one of my mentors in the practice of being an arbitrator. So I'm especially really thankful for the opportunity to chat with you today.
Well, thank you very much. It's part of my credo that you can't have too many friends. And I think that's part of the reason we're doing this whole California Conversation series, to introduce the very interesting people that I've had the privilege of meeting in my work with CalArb, and sharing those friendships and acquaintances with the world at a bit larger level. So again, as I said, delighted to have you with us. And I guess maybe the place to begin is to say, how in the world did this guy from Houston, Texas, end up being such a key player in the future of arbitration in California? Let's start dissecting that a little bit.
Sure.
So what took you out of Texas in the first place?
Well, I could be flip about it and say every time I go there in August, I know exactly what took me out of Texas anyway, but it's not quite that simple. So yeah, I grew up in Houston, Texas, and as for undergrad, I decided to go off to Georgetown, and I thought in DC, and I thought I was going to do something in politics. So pretty much, I immediately discovered another passion, and that was philosophy as an undergraduate. So I became a philosophy major at Georgetown, and from there actually went off to grad school in philosophy and a PhD program at Harvard, focusing on ethics. Because even though I was, fascinated by the deeper issues that philosophy explores, I always was sort of interested in their practical application. But even then, when I went to grad school, I sort of felt like there was a good possibility that I would wind up going to law school instead of finishing the PhD. And that is, in fact, what happened. You could say, why did that happen? Well, I think part of it was really this desire to be more involved in the practical matters of the world and working with people and helping people more than just in a purely academic setting, although I do like that aspect. And also, I was newly engaged at the time and realized that being a philosopher, it has certain cash flow implications that I also probably wanted to avoid. So those were really the true human impetus at that early stage for me to go off to law school, which I did. And after graduating, I never would have thought that I was going to come to California to do my career. I had a job waiting for me in DC, but like a lot of law students, I sent out my resume to the four winds trying to get a judicial clerkship wherever. And the first judge who said, "Hey, I want you," was Alice Marie Stotler, a district judge in the Central District in Orange County. So that's what took me out to Orange County, not too far from your neck of the woods, Chuck. And what do you know? It was really easy to get used to. So that was about 25 years ago. I still remain involved in Texas, and in fact, I have alternative arbitration chambers there, and I am licensed in Texas, but California is my main home.
Well, you, after your clerkship, entered into the world of big law. Tell us a little bit about the kind of professional experiences you had with your firm, or I should say firms,
Yeah,
and how that contributed to your migration.
sure. So, um, out of my clerkship with Judge Stotler, I went to work at O'Melveny and Myers in their Newport Beach office. And, just kind of stepping back a little bit, when I was in law school, at least where I studied, it was international arbitration was not a thing. Okay. I hadn't even heard of it. And my focus was I was going to be a US trial lawyer and I was going to do civil business litigation and secure whatever, right? And it wasn't until sort of by happenstance, after about 5 years into my practice as an associate at O'Melveny and Myers, that a case came to us that to this day is still one of the most interesting and enjoyable matters that I've ever had. Basically, this closely held family business in Orange County had inserted themselves at a key moment in time where they were buying uranium from the former Soviet Union and selling it to the power utilities of South Korea. And everything was great, except that at a certain point, the two parties, the now Russians and the Koreans, began to talk amongst themselves with an eye to cutting out the middleman, to which we took a dim view. And so, what did we do as good old California trial lawyers? Of course, we sued in federal district court. I believe we sued the Korean party for talking to the Russian party and therefore inducing the Russian party to breach their agreement with us. That didn't last too long in U.S. District Court. We got booted on forum nonconvenience, but not before we had had the opportunity to show that we were good advocates, we were passionate about our client's cause, and they said, hey, we want you to handle the arbitrations. And that led to a series of arbitrations in London and Stockholm under Swedish law. And it was quite a baptism by fire. The good news was that within the broader O'Melveny team at that time, we the partner that I worked with, who was a very prominent trial lawyer in Southern California, Mike Yoder, he was the leader of our team, but Steve Smith, who's another O'Melveny partner at the time, was a real expert and is a real expert in international arbitration. And he was sort of our guru. He gave us coaching behind the scenes so we didn't make fools of ourselves and be too much like cowboys. But at the end of the day, we found out that these California trial lawyers could do a pretty good job at international arbitration. And so that's how I entered into this space. Years later, Steve Smith and I continued to work very closely together, and he and I both migrated to Jones Day, where we continued an almost exclusively international arbitration practice.
Is that how you came north to San Francisco?
That is, they as part of the strategic alignment of the global dispute group, they wanted to have all the partners on the West Coast at least concentrated in one office. So that brought me to SF.
Well, you now moved away from big law and started your own independent practice as a neutral. And your thought process is in making that decision at the time you made the decision, why then as opposed to perhaps later? I just think your ruminations about that decision would be useful for somebody else who maybe is contemplating the same decision.
Sure, sure. Well, the I would say it is something to ruminate and contemplate over. When I when I made my decision, which is now about 2 years ago, the key thing was this. Ever since the beginning of my career with Judge Stotler, I had sort of believed that one of these days, after I was mature enough I was going to become a judge, or at least try to. But as my career continued to develop the more international angle, that sort of took me off of your customary judge track. But at the same time, I discovered there's this other animal out there, the international arbitrator, which gets to do really judge-like work. And in a lot of ways, it can even be more fun uh, and rewarding. So that sort of became the pole star that I was guided by for, well over a decade. But it also became clear to me that being a partner at an international law firm was not a very auspicious platform to just organically develop an arbitrator practice. Your partners aren't terribly excited about the lack of leverage that you bring if you were serving as an arbitrator, and they're even less excited about all of the conflicts that it creates. Just so that you can be this little arbitrator, you basically, if it's a big case, you are creating, they can't represent either side, right? And there are all kinds of ripple effects. So to make a long story short, I decided if I was going to do this, I just had to do this and take the plunge. Now, why then versus 10 years later? I think really it was because I felt that I had been in practice for over 20 years. I felt that I had the experience and qualifications I needed to have really the maturity and experience to do a good job as an arbitrator. And I didn't think that was going to get materially better over the next few years. And I also realized that, starting a practice as a neutral is not for the faint-hearted. And it requires quite a lot of energy. So I did not view it as something that I wanted to try and do as a kind of retirement activity. It was something that I felt, that while I was really still a hard charger, so to speak, I needed to go ahead and start climbing that mountain.
Well, I know what we haven't mentioned to date is your Spanish speaking
Hmm.
capacity. And you mentioned that you have a professional outpost in Houston. How have you used your Spanish language skills here as you launched into this new chapter of your career and begun to develop an arbitration practice?
Yeah, so that's right. So I'm from Houston originally, as I said, and I am Mexican American, and I'm fluent in Spanish, and I'm also pretty competent in French and Portuguese, and so that has sort of expanded my opportunities. And for me, it's also just a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun to work with different lawyers, different customs, different bodies of law. And so, as an advocate, I handled arbitrations in Spanish as well as English. I've done investigations in French and Portuguese and so forth. So that was always just a really big and important and fun aspect of my practice, and something that I had very much hoped will continue in my work as an arbitrator. And it has thus far. I'm doing matters both in Spanish and in English. And to me, it is a very rewarding thing to be able to be an American trained lawyer here in San Francisco on the edge of the Pacific Rim, but really kind of at an intersection where, for example, so much of the Asian investment that touches upon the Americas sort of has a natural beachhead here. And it's fun to work with those parties. Also in practice, I did a lot of work for Asian clients, particularly Japanese and Korean clients. And so I frequently found myself to be kind of the cultural intermediary between clients in the Far East, and often my own colleagues, my own partners in our Mexico City office or in our Sao Paulo office. So that's a role that I enjoyed in practice, and I also enjoy as an arbitrator.
As you look back on your years with private practice, Uh, do you see that the work experiences you had fell into any particular areas that developed some substantive expertise?
I think so. I mean, I certainly as an arbitrator, I try to emphasize that I have a lot of experience in construction,
Mm,
energy, technology related issues, mainly semiconductors there, but also the commercial aspects of international distribution and marketing and so forth. That's where I would say the bulk of my experience was in practice, and it's also obviously a big core of what I do as an arbitrator. The In the construction space in particular, that's a nice area that sort of really overlaps a lot of different kind of industry focuses, right? Because you have construction that's related to energy projects and mining and things of that nature. But for me, the fun with those kinds of cases is learning about new technologies, new industries, really rolling up your sleeves and working with experts or now as an arbitrator, analyzing the facts and understanding the technology and the issues that are really driving the merits of the case. So, yeah, I would say those are the areas that I have the most familiarity with, and I just really enjoy them.
your comment about a new case exposing you to a new area of knowledge or a new area of technology and exciting your curiosity to pursue that a little bit suggests to me maybe an explanation of how you got involved in teaching as well. So tell us a little bit about your experiences
Yeah.
as a professor.
Sure. So, ever since my days as a grad student at Harvard, I had some teaching and I always enjoyed it, right? Although back in those days, the student evaluations I got were he talks like a professor, he dresses like a professor, he acts like a professor, therefore we cannot understand him. So that was, it told me that maybe my teaching career in philosophy was not the thing to do. As as it continued, I've sort of done here and there various seminars and so forth. But when I finally launched as a full-time neutral and didn't have the constant demands of, being in a law practice at a big firm, I had the opportunity to actually teach as an adjunct on a regular basis. So this is my third year actually as an adjunct at UC Davis Law School, and I've also taught at the undergraduate level. I taught a seminar last year on indigenous rights, which actually was fascinating, right? But the main core of what I teach there is arbitration, and it's to the law students. Probably two-thirds of them are LLM or international students, because as it turns out, those are still the students that are most interested in international arbitration. I do want to just use this as an opportunity to plug for any of you who are just regular old Americans like me and Chuck, okay? Get interested in international arbitration. It is, I think, one of the most enjoyable possible areas of legal practice in this country, and the skills that you develop as an American trial lawyer and litigator are very easily transposed to the arbitration setting. And with the right guidance, you can really, really shine. So that's kind of one of the themes that I constantly try and share with my students. And I like working with them because, they have a beginner's mind, right? Everything is a new question to them, and they are not thinking in the same set ruts. And just dialogue with them, it always opens your eyes to different perspectives, different ways of doing things. And I just sort of feel like it keeps me sharp. It gives me an opportunity to uh, focus on some of the more esoteric procedural and jurisdictional questions that come up in certainly in the academic aspect of international arbitration, even though you don't necessarily see them every day as a practitioner or even as an arbitrator. But I think they help that kind of activity helps me be a richer, sharper arbitrator. And I like being able to work with the students and to give them an experience of a prof who isn't a full-time academic and who has a little bit of more of a practitioner's perspective that I think is helpful to them.
Your comment a minute ago about our proximity and location on the Pacific Rim reminded me that you also had a recent teaching experience in China. Obviously, a different kind of
Yeah.
didactic experience, but tell us a little bit about that. It sounds like it would be a fascinating experience.
Yeah, no, so I have to say, it was. This summer, I taught a workshop at the Shenzhen Court of International Arbitration, which is an arbitral institution in Shenzhen, which is the Chinese tech hub. It's right outside Hong Kong. And a friend of mine from the Chartered Institute, Mylene Chan, is very involved there, and she secured my invitation to join a faculty there and teach this course on U.S. style advocacy in international arbitration. And I had been to Hong Kong before, but I had never been to the mainland. I don't know what my expectations were exactly, but I must say I was very impressed. It is, we're in a time of tension between these two countries, and no one really knows exactly how that's going to develop. I think most of us hope that it comes to a mutually beneficial and peaceful resolution that allows us all to get on with business and growing prosperity on both sides of the Pacific. But we are in uncertain times. But going there, one of the main takeaways I had was that China is even, making allowances for difficulties in the economy right now. It's a powerful and modern juggernaut, really, and one that has to be respected, and one that we really have to learn as Americans need to learn more about, because complacency, I think, is a great enemy of success. So I went there in part because I had such a positive experience with my Chinese students at UC Davis. And the experience was replicated there in Shenzhen. It was a great audience, a very wide variety of practicing lawyers who were in attendance. And I was very impressed with the sophistication of the legal thinking from a different approach, obviously from a civil law continental type approach. But I also found, and this was quite interesting because there were Hong Kong barristers also in the mix, that in some ways an American approach to arbitration is more like a continental or civil law approach than it is to an English or British approach to arbitration. So we had some very lively discussions about certain procedural issues and approaches to cross-examination and whatnot. It was a lot of fun and a real eye-opener for me.
Well, as you reflect now on that experience, what are the important lessons you bring back home that are going to be playing a role in your practice as a neutral going forward?
I think it's about having a really acute awareness of your own assumptions and how they aren't necessarily the only way of doing things. And so really keeping a very open mind to different proposals that may be made. I mean, that is really, after all, one of the advantages of arbitration, right? You don't have a civil procedure code that tells you what to do. You can shape things. And I, as an arbitrator, always try and shape a proceeding that is going to be make sense and be fair and really have the buy-in of both sides. And I think the experience in China just really emphasized to me Uh, there are a whole lot of ways of doing things, and let's really allow the advocates to explain why they want to do it such and such a way, and work collaboratively, hopefully, to a common framework that everyone sees makes sense.
Well, you are now in a leadership role with CalArb, as well as serving in a prominent position on the programming functions of the ADR committee for California Lawyer Association. So you're wearing multiple hats here as a leader in the emerging profession. And I wonder if you could just muse a little bit about what you see happening within the profession of commercial arbitration as part of the dispute resolution field on the whole, and share with us your observations and where you see this going.
You mean in with respect to California in general, or more broadly?
Well, you answer the question the way you see fit.
Okay, well, so I think there's no question that arbitration will continue to grow. I think there's no question that international arbitration will continue to grow. Notwithstanding some of my earlier remarks about the obvious tensions, and people talk about decoupling between China and the US, I don't think that's going to in any way affect the quantity or importance of international arbitration. Quite the contrary, I think it'll actually increase it. And even if a certain amount of US activity goes elsewhere, it will be someplace like India or whatnot, right? So international arbitration, I think, is only going to grow. In terms of California, I think it is truly a major area of opportunity for the state. Now, to say that it's an area of opportunity for the state also implies that it hasn't reached its saturation point here, right? We still have a ways to go. And I think the reality is some of the most important economic drivers of this state, and what makes California's economy such a worldwide significant thing, is obviously the tech space out of Silicon Valley and elsewhere. And the truth is that maybe with the exception of pharma, biotech, the technology industries, there are more than one of them, obviously, have been a little bit slower than some other industries, the traditional, construction and oil and gas and things like that. They've been a little slower to adopt international arbitration. And I think that's largely because for so long, the US and US companies were just hegemonic in the space of technology. But as that begins to change, and as more and more parties, both across the Pacific and in Europe and elsewhere, start to have real bargaining power, they are insisting, of course, on not litigating their disputes in the Northern District of California or where have you, right? So I think there will be an increased buy-in, even by the technology sector. And with that will be even more arbitration work, hopefully centered right here in California. And I will say, I think it's precisely that vision of opportunity for arbitration that is one of the reasons that we were fortunate enough to win the bid to host ICA, the ICA conference here in, I guess, 4 years from now. Isn't that right?
Yes, 2028.
Yeah. I think ICA my understanding is ICA tries to host its conferences in places where they feel like arbitration is on the up and, trending upward, but where the presence of ICA can lend it even greater prominence. And I think that's why California was a perfect choice for them.
Well, tell us a little bit about some of the activities that you are involved in with both CalArb and the CLA Committee on Dispute Resolution, and how people might get involved who are watching this and are interested in trying to broaden their own experiences and make new acquaintances. You've done exceptionally well at that. Maybe you could have some pointers.
Oh, I really appreciate that question, Chuck, because the role that I do most in both of those organizations, and I sort of wear both hats simultaneously because it allows me to check off boxes for both organizations for the same amount of work. It's called double dipping. But I love programming, and in particular, I love hosting things like we're doing right now, webinars and panels and so forth, because and usually these can be done through the CLA, and they will be available on the on-demand library of the California Lawyers Association for CLE, or they will be available like this California Conversations on the CalArb website, right? But they provide a nice resource for people as people in the viewing audience, to learn about some little issue that they are interested in. But from my standpoint, it's, putting on those programs is also a major learning experience, right? And for people who like to constantly learn new things and stay sharp, it's just a fun thing to do. And it's also a really great way to meet new people that you're working with. And so, to everyone who is listening, I would say again, my name is Marcus Quintanilla. You can find me on the website at CalArb. And if you have an interest in organizing some kind of program in the area of arbitration, I'd be happy to talk to you. And one day when I am not in that role, but maybe this interview will still be available, know that there's going to be someone else at CalArb that's filling that role of programming co-chair, someone like Chuck, and they'd absolutely be interested in hearing from you and thinking about ways to get you involved in the programming that we offer.
Well, this has been a delightful opportunity, not only to share what I have come to know about you, Marcus, but to I think, pass on some words of wisdom to some people who are aspirants in this profession. You speak very encouragingly about the opportunities that are going to only exist in greater volume and number than currently is the situation. And California's position here on the Pacific Rim, as close as we are to Latin and South America, not to mention, of course, the prominent trade partners we have in Asia, suggests that the world is going to be the oyster, if you will, for people who want to pursue this career. And you're a perfect example that I think others can try to emulate. I'm delighted you'd take the time to spend some moments with us today to share a bit of your person. And I want to thank you very much on behalf of CalArb for being with us as this latest in our series called California Conversations. Marcus Quintanilla, what a treat it's been to have you with us. Thanks so much.
The treat has been all mine. Thank you so much, Chuck. Have a great day.